Assassin's Creed is a series that's always been full of what-if questions. What if Ezio's family never got hanged? What if Juno was still alive? And of course the most important one, what if the hook blade had more than 2 parts? But in all seriousness, the biggest what if question we've all been talking about for over a decade is what if Arno Dorian had hunted down Shay Cormac? It's a question that could have changed everything. A confrontation between Arno and Shay could have changed the entirety of Assassin's Creed Unity's story. But more importantly, it could have altered the overall Assassin's Creed timeline. And the crazy part is, the idea makes sense. On one side, you've got Arno Dorian, who spends most of Unity dabbling in the French Revolution and his simping obsession with Elise de la Serre. On the other side, you've got Shay Cormac, the assassin hunter himself, which, by the way, is a crazy nickname to have. He's a man who literally made a name for hunting down and wiping out assassins across the colonies. If there's anyone who could have made Arno's life a living nightmare, it's Shay Cormac. The two are polar opposites in their outlooks and their methods, which makes the what if question even more interesting. But here's the thing, as cool as this matchup sounds, and I'm sure we all want it never happened. The story we got in Assassin's Creed Unity has Arno all over the place. His father's death is right there in the background, but it never drives his character forward. Instead, his motivations revolve around Elise de la Serre and her father Francois, which, let's be real, just isn't that interesting of a story to follow. It's a shame too, because the murder of Charles Dorian is a huge event in Assassin's Creed lore, and Unity just kind of sweeps it under the rug. Meanwhile, Shay is the complete opposite of Arno, especially when it comes to a story's impact. He is most definitely not your generic Templar villain. This is a man who betrayed the Brotherhood. He burned it to the ground in the colonies, as I said, and he became the most infamous assassin killer in the franchise. He's older, way more experienced, and hey, I'd even say he's more scary and brutal in ways Arno never is. So today I want to explore that. Why did Arno never go after Shay? What would have happened if he did? How could that confrontation have changed Assassin's Creed as a whole? And then finally, towards the end, I want to go over my dream Unity story that I wished happened. Oh, and by the way, fun fact, I made this video when I had around 5,000 subscribers, but I did not upload it. So I'm remaking the whole thing again because we're straight ass back then. Anyway, let's get right into it. So let's start with the question, why didn't Arno ever go after Shay Cormac? The most logical answer, and the one that's just common sense, is age. Shay would have been quite old, at around 60, especially by the time Arno was grown up, and that's the most logical answer as to why they've never fought. But if we're talking lore and what we know, the simple answer is Arno had no idea who Shay was, let alone that he was the man who killed his father. Let's break that part down. So as we know, when Charles Dorian was assassinated, Arno was just a child. We see it. I mean, we literally play it. He saw his father on the ground, but he did not understand the severity of it, and as he grew up, nobody ever told him the truth. For some strange, stupid reason, the writers who wrote Unity never gives us a moment where somebody says, hey, there's this Templar named Shay who might have been involved in your father's death. There is not a single hint. It's like the game just erased that storyline completely. Part of the reason is probably that the assassins in France had bigger problems to worry about. I mean, think about it, what's the time period for Assassin's Creed Unity? It's the French Revolution, right? A massive part in history. And the French Revolution was tearing the country apart. We also know the Brotherhood was weakened at this point. And you see, I don't think chasing down a rogue Templar from decades earlier was at the top of anybody's list. On top of that, Arno's story was completely tied to Elise and her father. When Francois de la Serre was killed, that became Arno's focus. He wanted answers about his adoptive father, not his real one. And, you know, let's be honest, Arno's obsession with Elise drove just about everything he did in Assassin's Creed Unity. By the time he officially became an assassin, getting revenge for his real father's death wasn't even close to being on his radar. Then there is the question of whether Arno would have even cared if he did know. Unity pushes the theme of revenge not being the answer over and over, maybe too many times. Arno sees firsthand how Elise's obsession with vengeance destroys her, and his storyline is about moving past that kind of thinking. So even if somebody told him about Shay, I want you to answer me this question. Would he really have dropped everything to hunt him down? Maybe, maybe not. But one thing's for sure, it wouldn't fit the more reflective character he becomes, especially after the Dead Kings DLC. There's also the practical side. Shay wasn't an easy man to find. After the events of Rogue, he spent years traveling, hunting assassins and working for the Templars in secret.
So why didn't Shay return to the colonies to help Haytham and the others?
Yeah, Shay's mission was to retrieve these artifacts. But again, we mentioned that there were several artifacts and probably several manuscripts.
He even settled down and had a son. He even had a grandson, and he continued the order through his family. By the time Assassin's Creed Unity takes place, Shay is pretty much a ghost in the lore. Arno would have needed insane luck or serious connections to even track him down. So yes, in short, Arno never hunted Shay because he did not know who he was. His personal story was, focused all about Elise de la Serre, and his storyline was a pretty mundane one about redemption. And plus, on top of all of that, as I said, Shay was untraceable. I think it's a missed opportunity, sure, but when you look at the way Unity was written, sadly it makes sense. Now let's focus on the hypothetical itself. What would it actually look like if Arno Dorian confronted Shay Cormac? This is where things get interesting because you've got two skilled characters with completely different perspectives on the creed. First, let's do some storytelling. So imagine this. Arno finally finds out the truth about his father's death. Maybe he stumbles across an old Templar record, or perhaps he hears it from somebody who once worked with Francois de la Serre. Suddenly, everything changes. The man who killed Charles Dorian was not some random Templar. It was Shay Cormac himself, one of the deadliest ex-assassin turned Templars in the entire franchise. For Arno, who's already lived through betrayal, loss and his own failures, I like to think that revelation would hit quite hard. Does he drop everything and go full Batman mode? Or this one is probably more likely, does he hesitate, knowing what revenge can do to somebody? Let's go with option A for now. Say he does go after Shay. Maybe he tracks him down outside Paris or even across the Atlantic where Shay's name still carries weight. Arno's goal at this point would be pretty simple, right? Confront the man who changed his life forever. But here's a problem. By this stage in his story, Arno is not, and we need to remember this, Arno is not that same immature person at the start of Assassin's Creed Unity where we see him grow. He's way past that. At this point when he finds Shay, he'll already have seen how revenge consumed Elise and destroyed her. So the real question is, would Arno come looking for answers or blood? Now Shay would not be an easy target. I briefly mentioned this earlier, he's older by this point, sure. But I don't know about you, but the idea of somebody being more older would just make them more dangerous, right? Is that just me? Shay was born in 1731, and by the time he killed Charles Dorian in 1776, he was 45. Arno was only 8 years old then. Fast forward to 1793, when Arno's in his prime at let's say 25, Shay would be 62 years old, almost a grandpa. But this is Assassin's Creed. We watched an older Ezio still agile as hell. A few extra years would not make Shay any less of a threat. And we need to remember, this is the man who spent his entire life, or rather later life, dismantling the entire colonial brotherhood. He knows every assassin trick in the book, and he knows how to counter it. He's for sure battle hardened and with a deep understanding of both sides of the conflict. Shay would see Arno coming a mile away. I mean, he probably wouldn't even be surprised. If anything, he might respect Arno for seeking him out. Is that crazy to say? And before they start beating the everlasting shit out of each other, let's be honest, there's going to be a conversation beforehand. Arno first and foremost would want answers. I think the first question Arno would ask was why would he betray the assassins? And then finally, why kill his father? Shay would fire back with his own reasoning, pointing out the arrogance and recklessness of the Brotherhood. And then the fight starts. And here's where it gets interesting because who's winning that fight? I feel like on paper, most of you guys would say Shay and by a long distance. But let's actually go into depth. So Arno, let's be honest, is a lot more agile compared to Shay, especially in terms of finesse and the style of combat. Shay on the other hand, oh boy, he's the type of character that will bring brute force, he'll bring high IQ, and way more years of experience. I mean, Shay's built to counter assassins, right? The fight would not be easy for either of them. Arno would have to use the environment to his advantage, maybe scale buildings and rely on pure speed. While Shay, I see him more like the type of person to set traps and land those calculated well-timed shots with his air rifle. Oh, by the way, let me just make this clear. If Shay was 20 years younger, he would absolutely wipe the floor with Arno, but at this point, it's a lot more even. So how does it end? If Arno kills Shay, it would not feel like a victory to him. It would not bring back his dead father, and it would force Arno to confront the same cycle of revenge he's been trying to escape. If Shay wins, I guess he just adds another assassin to his list. Oh, and it also shows you that some fights cannot be won by pure skill. I think, whoever wins, it's safe to say that both men would walk away changed. Or maybe, hear me out, here's the secret ending cutscene that you unlock in New Game Plus. The fight does not end. Imagine a third party steps in, somebody chasing ezio artifacts, forcing Arno and Shay to fight side by side. It sounds far-fetched, I know, but picture them teaming up for a short while. By the end, Arno might gain a new perspective on the Templars, and Shay might see that not every assassin is as blind and arrogant as the ones he betrayed. So now that we've gone over the fight itself, let's talk about how that fight could have affected the Assassin's Creed lore overall. The first and most obvious impact would be on Arno. In Assassin's Creed Unity, his storyline is about moving away from revenge and learning to fight for something bigger than himself. Hunting down Shay would flip that on its head and drag him back into a personal vendetta. If, and this is a big if Arno killed Shay, he might be celebrated as a hero, but deep down he'd know it came at a cost, another life taken in the name of the Creed. On the other hand, if the encounter ended in a truce or an understanding, it would mark a huge shift in how the Brotherhood views the Templars. Arno has always been a bit of a rebel within the Order, questioning their rigid rules, and Shay is not a typical Templar either. That kind of meeting could push the series towards a more nuanced view of the conflict, though let's be honest, that's probably less exciting than a bloody showdown. The Templar Order would feel the effects too. Shay's reputation as the assassin hunter is legendary. If Arno was to defeat him, younger Templars might start questioning their beliefs. If the strongest among them can fall, maybe the Order is not as untouchable as it seems. But if Shay survived or even won, it would only strengthen the Templars. His victory could be used as proof that the Order's veterans are still unmatched, even at the age of like 60. And then there's the possibility of the American Brotherhood getting dragged in. Connor Kenway would have been 20 years old in his prime when Shay kills Charles Dorian. By the time Assassin's Creed Unity takes place, Connor's already rebuilt the Colonial Brotherhood, and hearing about Shay resurfacing in Europe could push him to intervene. Oh my god, imagine that. Ubisoft, take notes for this part, hear me out. Imagine a team up between Connor and Arno against Shay. I don't know about you guys, but to me, that's the kind of dream scenario I've been imagining for years. Arno alone would get his shit rocked, but with Connor at his side, it becomes a real fight. But beyond the action, of course, it would also highlight how the Brotherhood has changed in different parts of the world, and Connor's personal connection to his father Haytham would add yet another messy part to how he views Shay. Okay, for this last part in the video, I want to talk about what my dream version of Assassin's Creed Unity story could have looked like, because when you go back and replay it, the wasted potential is slapping you in the face. One of the biggest what ifs is imagining Shay as a main villain. Think about it, instead of Arno spending most of the game chasing after Elise and her father's killers, my alternate story would be what if he discovered that the man who murdered his own father was still alive and moving in the shadows. Shay's presence would have changed everything. The story would go from Arno simping over Elise 24/7 to something way more interesting to us fans. We'd see so many layers to that story. We would see, the whole revenge angle being used properly this time, and not in the generic way Ubisoft does it. We'll see the darker, more grey areas between both the Assassins and Templars. And most importantly, we'll see Shay Cormac again, the goddamn assassin hunter. A man who can single-handedly take out a ton of high-profile assassins. I mean, damn. Just imagine how Unity could have been if Arno had to face somebody with that kind of history and skill set. Oh yeah, and even the Dead Kings DLC could have tied into this. By the way, that DLC is not bad, but let's be honest, it could have been way more interesting. Instead of just focusing on Arno's grief, what if the Dead Kings DLC had brought back Shay into the picture? So hypothetically, Arno would have learned the truth, tracking Shay to the ruins of Saint Denis, and finally confronting the man who set his entire life on a tragic path. That would have been the perfect way to wrap up Unity while connecting it to Rogue in a meaningful way. Fans would have loved it, I would have loved it, you would have loved it, because it ties together those unsolved ideas instead of leaving them hanging like Ubisoft always does. Well, unless you're Juno, and they kill you off in a comic book that a majority of people have no idea even exists. Oh, and speaking of fans, the Assassin's Creed community has been speculating about this kind of crossover for years. Arno, Shay, and even Connor all in the same story. That's a dream scenario. The dynamic between those three could have been incredible. It's frustrating because Unity had all the ingredients to be one of the best games in the franchise, but Ubisoft played it safe like they always do. They kept Arno stuck in a romance plot that never hits as hard as it should have, and they ignored one of the most natural connections the series has set up. Shay as the main antagonist would have added weight, emotion, and a genuine sense of continuity between Rogue and Unity. We can only blame Ubisoft for not taking that shot. Let me know down below what your thoughts are on this what if scenario, and how you would change the story of Assassin's Creed Unity. And with everything I just said, I will see you in the next one.